Hey Voyboy.
Hey, what's up?
Okay, I'm here with Voyboy and I'm going to do one of my grilled interviews with him. So the place I want to start with you for this one is obviously it's going to be in the Dignitas era. Now, when I look at the results and I try to figure out the context of where Dignitas was in the early part of your career with them under the Dignitas name, it looks okay, so you got CLG were formerly the top team, okay? They were the one who won the events and stuff. Then sort of TSM comes up just after them at the end of the year. Meanwhile, it's Dignitas and Epic Gamer are these two teams battling to maybe be a TSM or a CLG, but just a level below. Is that accurate?
I would
How
say.
do you remember it?
Yeah, I would say that's relatively accurate. Back when I was on Dignitas, well, even before I was on Dignitas, we were originally called Rock Solid. It was me, Skara, Nair, Rambo, Sam the Ham, just a whole bunch of old school people, and we kind of just formed the team for fun. We were just kind of trying to play in some silly $1,000 Newegg Winter Manifest. It was, I think it was 2011, and we just kind of made the team. The only reason I got on the team was because I was friends with Sam the Ham, and he was trying to find people for the team, and I was just some kid. I played Ezreal mid. I was pretty good, and he was just he played with me before. We were kind of good friends, and he's hey, you want to practice to be a sub on this team? And I was yeah, sure, why not? I spend so many hours a day playing League of Legends, I might as well maybe try to make something. There wasn't really anything to make of it. It was just maybe I can win a processor, or just win a little prize, have something to show for all my work. And so I was yeah, sure, why not? I'll play. I was originally a sub on that team, and then as we started playing through the rounds of the tournament, I became the starter. We were doing really well. We got to the close to the finals. We actually took a game off of CLG, which at the time was the god tier team, really just completely uncontested. They were just the best team at the time, and we took a game off them, and we were pretty close to taking the second one to win the series, but we ended up losing it out. And I mean, honestly, we got third overall in that event, but that just was enough to give me some spark. I just got I feel the drive for just becoming really good at League was honestly created there, because before that, I mean, I was just playing, I was just working on mechanics obviously and stuff like that, but then here it was just a random rookie taking off games with my ragtag team of friends, off of, at the time, which CLG, which was a huge deal. And yeah, I mean, I was just wow, I can actually maybe do something with this. And so we just kept playing together as a team. We kind of went through a little bit of roster changes and stuff, but we just kind of kept practicing, kept trying to qualify for events, and then here comes the Season 1 World Championships, which at the time was pretty much the biggest deal. There was no other events, there was no LANs, there was nothing. It was the Season 1 World Championships, $100,000. This was huge, and I think everyone who was anyone in the League pro scene, or not pro scene, League high elo scene or whatever at the time, was just this is it, you have to make it or it's done. And my team going into that, we were really confident. We were taking games off a lot of people, and yeah, we had a rough time. We went into the winners bracket. We basically just had to win one series to go to Sweden and compete at DreamHack for the grand prize. And we ended up dropping a series to, I believe it was CLG first, in a 2-1. It was really close. And then we went to the loser bracket, one game away again from winning, and we lost, I think it was to EG as well. So we ended up getting fourth, one place away from qualifying and getting to go. And that was pretty devastating. I honestly thought I was going to stop playing League competitively as it was at that moment. And then after the Season 1 Championships, I watched it. I was actually really inspired. I remember Shushay at the time, he did phenomenally, and I was just this guy is so good. I don't think I can quit just yet. I'm just gonna keep playing. Just wait. Maybe there'll be some more tournaments and stuff like that. And we just stuck together as a team. We didn't really practice that much. I was really busy with school and such. But over time, we just progressed, and events started coming up, qualifiers, IEM, IPL and stuff like that, and there was a bunch of online tournaments as well. No real high stakes, but it was just something to play with as a team to just keep together and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I just kept playing with Rock Solid. Me and Skara had really good synergy. We ended up going through a few iterations of the team, but eventually we got to where we were, and we got picked up by Dignitas, and the rest was really just history.
Okay. So when we think of the period where the basically the latter period of when you're in Dignitas, okay, so basically the beginning of 2012, So your team did like third at IEM Kiev, and I saw in an interview you'd said like actually you guys hadn't really practiced much before that event, so third was like a good result for you maybe. You'd come second obviously at the IEM after that. Now this is the big result obviously in your career that people remember you for still, because they had this MVP award at the tournament and you got voted the MVP of the tournament. But I have a different way of asking you about this, because most people would just say, oh, you were the MVP, so you must have been the best player in the whole tournament, you know, like it was obvious. But actually what people didn't know was the way they voted those MVP awards at those IEMs was like a bit funky, because if you notice, they almost never gave them to anyone who was on the winning team of the tournament. It tended to be like the fans would give it to whoever their favorite was from the tournament. So my first question on that line would be, were you really the MVP? Did you really carry the whole tournament?
Yeah, for sure. So the way the voting went down was they started the voting the day before the finals, and this was basically after all the group stages were played, after all the semifinals and stuff was at, and then just going into they wanted to have the results of the MVP available after the finals obviously completed. So basically the voting was open during the finals, like everyone could vote, they could go out, they could go online and go, but a lot of the votes already came in before the finals were actually played. And for that tournament, like group stages, semifinals, everything up until the finals, I thought I definitely played like out of my mind. Like I was just on point on almost every single game. People were just raving about my Lee Sin and stuff like that, and I was just like, I was basically on top of the world. I felt really, really confident, felt really, really good. And then when we went into the grand finals versus M5, the voting was open, but a lot of the votes had already came in, and although we didn't do as well as we would have liked, like as a team, I think in general we got pretty much destroyed by M5. It wasn't real, like there was so much hype going into that series, like this is the best of America versus the best of EU, like this is gonna be like the games to watch, and then we just go in and we just kind of lost 2 miserable games. Like I might have picked up like a few kills here and there, but overall like they weren't really what everyone was expecting. So personally, I don't think I really deserved the MVP award for that tournament. If we had won, if we had done really well, if I had carried my team like I had been doing in the previous games and stuff, then I definitely would have been like, yeah, sure, like I think you could say that. But yeah, I mean, we lost M5. I don't think I actually played that bad in those series. Like I held my lane. I think I picked up some kills. I actually played top lane Nautilus, which was kind of like a hidden gem at the time, but it wasn't enough to take the crown home. So
the interesting thing is, I actually checked, and I think you're the North American player who's played M5, that lineup with Edward, the most times of anyone. Because you played them like IEM Kiev, yes, Hanover, you played them at, let me think what next, IPL 5, IEM Katowice, there might be one other, I'm not sure, but yeah. So it counts up in the end to, I think you played them 4 separate times. Whereas most NA teams, like TSM, never played them officially. CLG, I think, played them twice. So most people actually haven't played M5 very much, even when they were at the top. TSM a couple of times. No, they played them once, actually, Kiev final. So you've seen actually M5 through their whole history when they had the Edward lineup. Now, at the beginning, we were talking about this tournament here, everyone was saying, like, oh, they're unbeatable, you know. I mean, they'd only dropped something like 1 map over those first 2 tournaments. Were they really, like, unbeatable when you played them?
At IEM Hanover, I don't think they were unbeatable. They were very, very good. They had some strategies that were like a little bit unorthodox. Like they had the thing where they gave Urgot blue a level 1 and he just 2v1, and they had like Alistar roam around our jungle and like kill IWillDominate and stuff like that. But I definitely don't think they were like on top of the world. They were really, really good. But I honestly think like if we as a team had actually put in more practice time and just been able to like for example, just a little precursor, going to IEM Hanover, we as a team we barely practiced at all. Like if you remember, it was pretty revolutionary. Like TSM, they had got the gaming house, they were doing all this stuff back when they still had the Rain Man stuff, and they didn't have that great of a result at that tournament. But going into that, like I was so busy with school, like Scar was still finishing up college and stuff like that. I think everyone else was doing sort of similar things. So our practice days, I don't think we scrimmed more than like 3 or 4 times going into IEM Hanover, like after Kiev. Okay. So I feel like the fact that we were able to like get to such a point as a team without barely putting any time in was pretty mind blowing, at least to me. Like we showed up, we were doing really well in the NA scene, but I honestly did not expect to be able to make it to the finals and get so far. So I honestly think if we had that kind of prep work and stuff, like if we could boot camp for like a week as M5 did, I think we definitely would have stood a better chance. But yeah, I mean, at the time, M5 was definitely the best team in the world. I just think that we could have actually been up there and competing with them if the situation was a little bit different for us.
The fact that you've played them so many times, though, the interesting thing that I was thinking of was, so in this match, which is one of the most famous of your career because it comes with the MVP award afterwards, people would think, oh, in that case, Voyboy must have done like really well against M5 every time. But the strange thing about the M5 team is their top laner is famous for just like feeding kills over and over and over, and you're a player who likes to like 1v1 someone and try and kill them over and over. So doesn't that, in a sense, aren't M5 like the worst team for Voyboy to play if he's going to go off?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, going into that match, like at the time though, Darien he didn't really have the reputation he did as being like the feeder, like, oh, kill Darien 10 times and Gambit's gonna just win because you wasted so many resources on him. I actually respect him pretty much as like a solid top laner. Just held him in high regards relative to like anyone else at the time. And I remember going into that series, like he played Shen and then he played Aurelia, I believe. Both champions are pretty easy to do fairly well with, just safe, solid picks at the time. We actually didn't think that he played Shen going into that tournament because we've never seen him play Shen before. So we were actually under the impression that it wouldn't go picked, so we were gonna delay our Shen pick for later, and they took it away from us. And at the time, Shen was basically just like a must ban versus like almost every team, so that really threw us for a loop. But yeah, I mean, I think that the persona that Darien has created to be like he dies a lot and draws pressure and stuff like that kind of came a little bit afterward, definitely like in the past 2 splits of LCS. But yeah, I mean, people basically would think like, if you give me a solo lane, if you just let me 1v1 someone, then he's just going to go off and carry the game. And I definitely think that was something that I did and do fairly well. But yeah, it wasn't really the case at the time.
Okay. So what this leads into is, even the team you lost to, M5, okay, in theory, you and your lane might have been doing well in this matchup anyway. In that tournament, you also got to play Soaz. He was in AAA. You beat him. You got to beat CLG in the group stage, I think. So you played all the big top lane names at the time, okay, and you'd done well, or you'd maybe even beat them outright. And you're saying yourself, like, this was a tournament where you're playing out of your mind. How much of this tournament was like, the best reflection of my skill, or like, this is how everything working out? Was there any luck involved? Was there anything like people weren't prepared for something you were doing? What do you think?
I think the fact that I just played so many champions really caught people off guard. Like, for example, versus CLG, I took away Hotshots Nidalee and just used it against him. I think one thing that really threw people for a loop was my top lane Lee Sin. Lee Sin at the time, or maybe not at the time, but like as a champion, people relatively just considered him like a viable jungle pick. But no one ever really considered laning him that much. I did it a little bit in solo queue and stuff like that. Maybe whipped it out 1 or 2 times here in online tournaments, but no one was like, oh yeah, like Lee Sin, like if you give it to Voyboy, like he's just gonna like carry the game. And then throughout all of IM Hanover, pretty much until we played M5, I just basically got him whenever I felt like the situation was appropriate, and people just really weren't ready to play against my Lee Sin. And at the time, Lee Sin's kit was better for top lane. You used to be able to get armor from maxing your W. So for example, Soaz would pick something like Riven, and I'd be able to just max W and just outduel him and just outpressure him throughout the whole game. So definitely think that was something that kind of caught people off guard. But for the most part, I just thought that I was just playing all the meta, or like not even meta champions, just like my own champion pool very well, and just was able to outperform most other top laners at the tournament.
Because after this, obviously we go into this period with CLG, but before we go into that, I want to ask you like a hypothetical question, which I don't think I've actually seen anyone ask you when I look through all the interviews and stuff, which is, let's just imagine for a second, in a hypothetical world where we can go back in time, that for some reason you just don't join CLG, you just stay in Dignitas. Now, I saw you make some comments where you said, like, if you hadn't have made the final of Hanover, maybe you would have just gone to school or something like that. Mm-hmm. If you hadn't have left Dignitas, do you think you would have gone to school? Would you have kept in the team? Like, what do you think the future of that team could have been if you just kept that lineup together?
I actually think the future could have been pretty good. Dignitas was like a solid team. As for going to school, honestly, I probably would have not gone anyway, just because, for example, I basically at that, like, after I am Hanover, when I saw how like big the crowd was, when I saw what this game could become, and like I knew the plans that Riot had for the future of like the LCS and stuff like that, I was basically just like, well, basically, do I really want to let all my skill go to waste? Do I want to do nothing with this? Like, to me, playing League of Legends competitively, it was like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like, it was basically something where I was thinking like, well, I could just quit now, drop it all, go to school, get my degree, go for medical school or get a job afterward, and I'll just be done with it. And then, or I could do this thing, see how far it takes me. If it's not going well, I'll drop it after a year, and I'll just go to school, go along the route that I basically pre-planned for myself. And then I thought, like, this is not something that I want to give up. Like, this is something that I could tell stories about for decades and decades to come. I tell, like, my grandkids, like, oh, you're playing, like, Mario 950 on, like, your little DS 59000. Like, I played League of Legends, like, when I was, like, a young whippersnapper, like yourself. And, I mean, it's just, I feel like it's just something that's, like, not many other people get the chance to do. So when I knew, like, I had the skill, the talent, people were, like, scouting me, and I knew I could continue doing this for as long as I really wanted to, I just made the decision, I'm going to keep it up and see where I can take it. And, like, thus far, it's been pretty amazing. So I don't really know when I'm going to plan to stop.
Since in the Dignitas era, you had such an aggressive play style and such a heavy, almost like a duelist style, whereas people who watch League of Legends now, it's so different. What I wanted to ask you was, what was the role of the junglers that you had in that period? So you had Jatt in, like, 2011, then you moved into having IWillDominate. Like, was there something that you had planned with them that allowed you to play that style? Because, I mean, one of the famous things that came after this period was that people would just camp anyone who was a really good 1v1 top laner. So was there something about how they played that allowed that to happen, or was it just a natural way that it played out?
For the most part, I think it was just kind of natural. Like, for example, when Jatt was on the team, he was really famous for playing his Udyr, and he just basically would just farm up the jungle and just come out with, like, Merc treads and a wit's end as fast as possible. He'd, like, tax lanes, he'd take some farm here and there, and just try to become a beast. And we didn't really have, like, a coherent play style where it'd be like, all right, you, like, gank this, counter gank this. Like, we just kind of played fluidly, made decisions as the game came. And yeah, I don't think so, but I had a bit more synergy with IWillDominate. A lot of times, like, we do things where, like, after a certain point, I know I can 1v1 this enemy champion. If I just get a buff, I'll take his red buff, I'll go up there and I'll just make plays by myself. Or, like, we'll share a camp at level 1, so I get an early level 2, and I can just, like, start off, get first blood, carry the game from there. So we had a few tricks like that. I definitely think, like, if we went into a game with Dominate, knowing that, like, the enemy jungler is probably going to camp me, they have, like, a really heavy CC or, like, duelist combination from their top and their jungler, then we try to play around that and have Dominate be ready for counter ganks and stuff like that. But we never really went into a game like, okay, like, you have to camp this lane or else, like, something's going to happen. It was just, a lot of the picks I played were very safe, very strong on their own. I could handle the pressure. Like, for example, when I played Lee Sin versus AAA with Soaz and Linak, like, for example, I played Lee Sin versus Soaz's Kennen and Linak's Mundo, and that game, the whole game, Linak was just continuously trying to come up there and gank me over and over, and every time I would just get away. And this basically just allowed my team to take control of the rest of the map. Skara, QD, and Locust just went off, and Dominate didn't even look top. He basically just ignored top lane, allowed me, like, I was just like, okay, you guys just do your own thing, take as many advantages as you can, because this guy is wasting a lot of time up there. And that's just, like, kind of an example of the kind of stuff that we did. If I go into a game knowing with, like, full confidence that I can handle anything they throw at me, then I'll just tell my team to just let my lane be. Like, there's no reason to come up here unless I actually think it's a good opportunity. And we would get a lot of advantages off of that kind of a play style.
When it came to joining CLG, I wanted to ask, like, what the expectation was for you and the team, because one of the things people might not notice, it's easy for someone who's watching this interview now to think, oh, they just recruited you because you were so good at IM Hanover, for example. But actually, there was a tournament which was one of your first lands, the one where you went to and you subbed for CLG. And at the time, you mentioned earlier on that you were playing a lot of, like, AP mid champions. And so since you were subbing for Big Fat LP, who was a mid laner, people would think, and I think CLG thought originally you were just going to play his role, okay? But actually, you ended up playing top lane in most of the matchups anyway, which at the time was Hotshot's role, obviously. So do you think that played any part in them thinking, you know, well, we could just put him straight in this team as well and it'd work out? Like, what were the expectations actually you coming into the team, and what do you think from their side they were expecting?
Yeah, so at the time, it, like, for example, if we're in the pro scene, people look at results of tournaments and, like, how well you play and stuff, but generally people have these opinions that they develop of players over long periods of time. So, for example, in CLG, before I was to join the team, they all pretty much thought I was the best top laner in the NA and potentially the world, because I remember having this conversation with them. And yeah, I mean, it's like I've been playing with everyone in NA for, like, years up until that point, like probably I think 1.5 to 2 years, and so people just grow respect. The opinions can obviously get changed by how you play and stuff like that. But up until that point, I never really had any bad showings or anything to make someone think otherwise. So yeah, I mean, definitely the experience I had with them playing at MLG Raleigh, where we just took first place pretty easily, was really good. Definitely think it factored into their decision to try to recruit me. And then, yeah, I mean, obviously having good showing after good showing, tournament after tournament, definitely helped out. But yeah.
There was another factor that I just wanted to try and run by you as an idea, which was another thing. Since the CLG period didn't go very well, and people always look back and think, oh, Voyboy was underperforming or whatever, one of the reasons I also thought that people felt underwhelmed by you coming into the team, because they were thinking, okay, we're going to have like an all-star team here. Well, also, you couldn't go to the first event with them, which I think was the MLG, and this is where they came second, but they just used xHazzard as like a sub who hadn't even played with the team. So people were thinking to themselves, well, if the sub can do that well and they get second, then, you know, when they add in Voyboy, they're going to rule the whole world, you know. Do you think that was a factor in why things were, like, the criticism was so hard on you later on?
I think one reason the criticism was so hard on me is because basically when a team underperforms as a whole, it's very easy to just look at, like, the last implemented, like, factor and be like, well, they added Voyboy, they went to Korea, they didn't do so well there, they went to Worlds, they didn't do so well there. I guess the team's not doing so well, Voyboy's not doing so well, and then I guess slightly more percentage-wise of the blame can go on someone like me. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that that MLG really had that big of an impact. I definitely remember reading a lot of comments at the time, like, well, CLG lost in the closest series we've ever seen to TSM, and they had xHazzard, and xHazzard is just filling in for Voyboy. So I definitely think if I was at that tournament, we would have won it, no doubt. But the thing is, during that time period, they were actually practicing with xHazzard. I had finals. I was doing like the IB program and stuff like that. So I was just, I had tons of tests, tons of homework or stuff to do. So I pretty much had no free time to practice, and that was actually my fault going into that. They wanted me to practice. They wanted me to go to that tournament, and then I just came. I was like, guys, I'm just not gonna have time to do this. Like, I'm so busy with work. I really wish I could play, but you guys are gonna have to find a sub for this until we can like get past that tournament. And then we were going to Korea shortly afterward. Like, after I graduated, I think I left for Korea and within a week. So yeah, that was just a period where I just basically was like, all right, guys, like, I'm sorry, but use someone else. They found xHazzard. They practiced with him. It was going pretty well. They went to the tournament, showed up, got second. I definitely think that raised some expectations. I personally was like, oh yeah, like, we're going to be so solid. And when we went to Korea, like, we actually, like, we didn't do overall so badly. Like, when we practiced, we would take games off top Korean teams at the time. It honestly didn't feel bad. But then going to the OGN series, we dropped out fairly early. We did not make it as far as we would have liked to. CLGU made it, who was a kind of our counterpart, sort of not our rival, but just we definitely compared ourselves to them a lot. We thought we were better than CLGU, but they outperformed us by far in that tournament, and by extensions, obviously, in the World Championships. So, I mean, yeah, I just think our results definitely did not match up to my team's or the public's expectations.
So, just as a side topic, since you bring it up, so you got to actually live in Korea, and you guys, in theory, could practice CLGU quite a lot, and I know before Worlds, you guys practiced them as well. You were known for a long time, at least amongst your peers, as like, oh, this guy's the best NA top laner, especially the best 1v1er, and that was like the same reputation that Wickd had in Europe for a long time. So you must have played him a lot in practices, etc. Like, did you kill Wickd when you played him?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this now. I don't know if he'll, or like, I think people will disagree, but overall, when we practiced versus CLGU, I definitely would like do really well versus Wickd. I performed pretty well as a whole against CLGU. I remember, yeah, it was just like people like. I remember when Wickd was trying to learn Jace. Jace just came out. He was like really OP, and then I would just beat him consistently, like over and over and over with like a multitude of different champions. And then we were just like, well, I guess Jace just isn't a very good champion. And then he got better at Jace, obviously, and it became pretty well known that Jace was just really, really strong. But I think as a whole, I definitely like was a match for. I matched Wickd up pretty well. He won't say it. I probably wouldn't admit it if he didn't. But like, there's so much pride between like players. But yeah, I think overall, everyone on my team at the time would definitely have agreed with me.
Okay, well, when we were talking, about the first period of CLG, another factor that people remember, like the storylines people remember, just the broad strokes, one of them's, so Voyboy underperformed in CLG, but the other one is people always kind of mock HotshotGG's period as the jungler, and I think everyone, even in his own team, agrees, like, that didn't really work out, that experiment. Now, here's an interesting thing. I actually have, like, a different way to ask about it, because was there ever a period where HotshotGG jungling made sense? Because I actually looked into some of the games, and there was a period when he played Nautilus where he actually looked pretty good, but then that champion basically got, like, sort of nerfed out or whatever, and then it seemed like he couldn't adapt to the other jungle champions. Was this just like an anomaly? Was there actually a period where you thought, like, this is making sense with him jungling? Like, what was it like?
Yeah, for sure. I thought overall, like, and as a player, when I think of a team that I have played on's performance, I'm gonna think of not just tournament results but also scrim results, because scrim results no one else but the people on the team will ever see. And basically a scrim is just, a tournament is just like a glorified scrim. Like, you're playing for higher stakes, you're using everything you have, but it's not like someone's not gonna be playing, like, at least from teams I've been on, no one's gonna not play at their best when they're playing a scrim. So throughout the time that I was on CLG, when we would practice and we'd work on each other's, like, performance and stuff like that, I never actually felt like Hotshot played as bad as people give him credit for. There was periods of time where I was, like, pretty impressed. I was like, you're doing everything you have to, like, all this stuff. There was definitely moments where we were kind of caught off guard. Like, for example, I remember when we would play against Dandy back when he was on MVP White, I believe. He just had, like, a completely revolutionary style of jungling, and it just completely blew, like, our team and Hotshot out of the water.
Okay. What kind of stuff was he doing?
Basically, for example, at the time, Skarner was really strong. He would play Skarner. He would basically just rush, like, a really early Oracle, and he would just go throughout the map. He'd, like, time his camps perfectly. He'd basically just clear all our wards and just put so much pressure on the map, and that's something that we really didn't have an experience playing against, and so we tried to get Hotshot to adapt to it, and I think he did it fairly well, but obviously not as well as Dandy at the time. So yeah, Dandy was definitely a big influence on Hotshot later on when we were in Korea. But yeah, I don't think Hotshot was like at home on jungling, but I don't think he played bad per se throughout the time I was on the team. Definitely some underperformance in like actual lands and tournaments and stuff like that, but I think that could be said about anyone that was on the team at the time. So that's my take on it.
Well, whenever we have a top laner, especially nowadays when people are very familiar with like people getting camped or getting 2v1'd if they're good at top lane, people are always going to look. If they think the top lane is good and he's not doing well, they're going to say, okay, is his jungler helping him? Does he help him out? How did Hotshot evaluate, how would you evaluate him on this role? Like, how good was he actually like helping or relieving pressure, or was he just focused on the other areas of the map? What do you think?
So a lot of people throw Hotshot under the bus in this regard. Like some people, like a lot of my, I guess, like hardcore fans will be like, yeah, Voyboy, like he was just so good, but like he was still like so good, but like Hotshot just wasn't jungling well, so it just made him like get out pressured and just lose lane and stuff like that. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think Hotshot as a whole tried to play the jungle role as best as he could. I definitely don't think that was like a really big focus on my lane at any time, because overall on that team it was basically just like the mentality was a lot of times revolved around get double of fed, get him going, and just have him be the late game carry that we need him to be. And so I think a lot of his pressure was definitely allocated down there. But overall, I think, yeah, jungle and top laner, a lot of times you'll see them be very related, or a lot of times they'll just have like no synergy at all. So if a team can build like a strategy where they're just gonna pick two strong skirmishing champions, a top laner and a jungler, and they're just gonna focus on that lane, try to shut down the enemy champion, then that could work really well. And I don't think we ever really built that kind of synergy when I was on CLG, but we did end up playing against some teams that definitely did out pressure us at the time. So I think there definitely could have been some more interactions between us there, but I don't think it was like a big hindrance on our performance overall.
Okay, well, I had an interesting way to kind of phrase this as a question about Hotshot's jungling style. Okay, so I've spoken to a lot of StarCraft 2 players, okay, and any StarCraft 2 player who plays and he has one matchup that he really hates, okay, let's say he's a Zerg player and he plays versus the Protoss, and he doesn't like that these Protosses sometimes do like a weird all-in move and then he loses to it. So he'll always say like, oh, Protoss is just easy, like it's a bullshit race, if I played Protoss, I'd just do that every time, and if they ever even lose, they must be idiots, why not just do that every time? They think to themselves that since the other position is so easy, that if they played it, they'd just run the table and beat everyone. So you would think in League of Legends, if someone played like AD carry and then they took a turn playing support, or someone played top lane, so HotshotGG, and then he plays jungler, surely out of everyone, you know, this guy should know what he needs to give to the guy who he's going to then sort of play a sort of supportive role towards. But one of the different things about you and HotshotGG was you had such different styles of top laning. So am I reading too much into it that maybe Hotshot did give you what he thought you needed, but that was like what Hotshot would have needed if he was the top laner, whereas Voyboy, maybe he needs something else because he's going to play so aggressive. Am I reading too much into this theory?
I definitely think you have a point. Like, when Hotshot played for CLG, when he played top lane, his style was basically like, he'll just pick a safe top laner, a tanky person probably, someone that brings CC, like Joedat, for example, maybe Nullify, he'll take TP, and he'll just try to farm. Go even with his lane. That was Hotshot's goal. Anytime he played top lane, it was just go even. If he had some kind of like huge advantage or something, or he counterpicked for whatever reason, then he'd play differently. But yeah, the goal was always to go even and just be a contributing factor to the team. Don't be a vulnerability, and that was basically just how he played. Like that was how he thought top lane had to be played. And then for me, I just try to make myself as big of a factor as possible, which is basically the complete opposite. I'm not really concerned with going even, going under, or overperforming. It's basically just I try to create pressure. I try to play my champion to the fullest extent that it can go to. If there's an unfavorable matchup, if I'm put in some kind of like crazy circumstance where I just can't make aggressive plays, or I calculate it to the point where I'm like, okay, all I have to do is just sit here and farm and my team will be carrying me to victory, then I'll adjust my play style accordingly. But I think that there's definitely like a big variance on the spectrum. Like overall, you'll find me trying to make plays, trying to go aggressive. I'll take calculations, I'll take risks, I'll do things that I think are going to benefit me. I'm not always going to be right. It's pretty much impossible to say that you're always going to be right when you try to put something in like a numerical form for the game. But overall, I thought I do a pretty good job of it. Whereas for Hotshot, for example, he would just basically don't help me in lane, just let me farm. I'm just gonna buy tank items, get in my frozen heart, and be a factor late game. And I think those different styles definitely came into play. But I definitely think Hotshot understood when I played a champion, like what I was going for, what I was trying to do. Like he has a good understanding of the game, just as I did. So we would definitely be able to communicate on those issues. But yeah, like sometimes I definitely felt like he would under pressure my lane, but it wasn't something that was like when I'm looking back on the team that I'm just like, if only like this happened, like we would have done so much better. There's a lot more to it than that.
In the CLG period, now here's the interesting thing. I found in an AMA, while you were actually still in CLG, you actually said something along the lines of like, you thought you were like twice the player you were before you'd been in CLG before. You said like you didn't feel like you were underperforming. So if the team itself didn't do very well, is there anything... obviously, if you said that you were performing well there, I'm not going to say you're lying or whatever. Yeah. But what I want to know is this: is there something about the actual environment that you were playing in that meant that you couldn't be as successful? Like, for example, was the 2v1 meta more strong were more people using it at that time? Is there something that you can put your finger on as like, this is what maybe held me back in that position, or the team held me back in any way?
I would say that honestly, I don't think anything like game related really held me back. Like the 2v1 meta definitely exists for a time. I was actually one of the first ones to start like taking blue buffs and 2v1ing voluntarily and just trying to outperform the enemy top laner. Like for example, Olaf, who became like a must play for a long time, I was actually one of the first ones to pick him up. Diana, who pretty much got like almost no play at the season 2 world championships, or she got very little play. I was one of the first to just start playing her, and I would go into 2v1s very happily, just knowing I could come out ahead with TP and stuff like that. So that was a strat that I was very well versed in. I thought I honestly played champions that were pretty relevant to the meta throughout my whole course. Like when Jax and Olaf and stuff were really strong, then I would play those very successfully. I think the only champion that over my career, it's just been like, well, he doesn't really play that very much, has been Shen. I think people, like I remember for like the last All-Star vote, I remember Scar and Deadlift and stuff saying like, well, we'd probably vote for Voyboy, but he doesn't really play Shen, so we got to give it to Darius. And so I mean, that's something that I've now rectified. Like I've come to terms with the fact that he's just such a game changer. He's really strong, so I picked him up. But yeah, that's not something that I really played too much back in the day.
Like whether there are any game factors that maybe made people think you underperformed?
I don't think it really had to do with the game. I think for the most part on CLG, a lot of the focus was just towards being that like tank line, the protection for double lift, they want as little risk as possible. Like I remember I would like carry some games. I'd be like, hey guys, like wasn't that good? Like don't you like my Katarina top? Like isn't awesome? And they actually Katarina was actually a champion they did like we actually liked. I didn't even get to play it at Season 2 World Championships because I was saving it for the next stage, but we didn't make it. It was like basically a surprise because no one at the time really respected how powerful Katarina was, and we were like pretty confident on making it out of the group stages, and when we didn't make it out, I just was like, wow, maybe I should have just flipped it out earlier on. But I mean, yeah, overall they wanted me to play like more of a tank role, more of a peel role, and that was not something that I was as good at as like playing one of those carry champions like Jax, Diana, Katarina, etc. But it's definitely something that I did pick up for the team. It's not something that they had like a huge problem with. It's just kind of like a growing pain. They wish I would have more voluntarily wished to play those champions. So I think that plus like just the fact that we didn't manage to do very well in Worlds just led to like, I don't know, some dissonance within the team.
So when you made this comment while you were in CLG that you felt like you were like, well, it sounded like you felt like you'd improved a lot. I remember one of the comments you said along with this, okay, was that you said, you know, in the past when you played this like balls to the wall sort of super aggressive style, you know, that if that really worked, it was awesome, but it was risky. And so I think you were tying it into the fact that you felt like now maybe you were smarter or you could play more, like you could be like appropriately aggressive. Is this kind of like, what subtleties here were people not seeing when you were in CLG that you changed about your game?
Yeah, for sure. So going into CLG, I definitely thought I had a really good understanding of the game, and I'm not saying that I didn't, but throughout my course on CLG, I think I really came to appreciate like a lot of different types of play styles, especially for like top lane. Like playing with Hotshot on the team, I definitely understood and respected the importance of just being able to go even, like have your team always be able to rely that you're going to get your job done, nothing more, nothing less, just what's expected, and that's obviously going to come into play in a lot of different strategies. And then I also expanded my own like signature play style of just playing the carry, playing the champions that can just go in, kill everything, win lane, do that kind of stuff. And I kind of just melded my own play style with that and just tried to figured out the best ways to appropriate it for each situation. So going into some games, I get the champion I wanted to play, they would pick something that I know I could counter pick. I'd do this. If they pick something that's really safe, I would counter it with another safe champion just to be able to be that force that my team needed. And I think overall, coming off of CLG, like not only the fact that I thought, like I said, I grew as a player, but another thing you have to consider is before I was on CLG and I moved to Korea, I was not playing the game nearly as much as I was when I went there. So I would play maybe like a few games every day if I could play at all. Back when I was still in school, I was so busy with all the stuff I had to do. And then when I moved to CLG, it was just basically like, well, you're in Korea now, plop, play League of Legends, and that's what I did. And so I feel like that definitely helped improve my game a lot too. But at the same time, everyone was buckling down as well. So as a whole, like all across all regions, all players, everyone was just putting their all into it. The Season 2 World Champions were right there in front of us, like $1 million grand prize. Like everyone was giving it their all, and I did the same. So I think pretty much everyone grew as players, as teams, and I definitely think I did as well. But obviously, as a team, we weren't able to improve enough to do any better than we did.
So around this time when you were in CLG, almost actually immediately when you almost joined CLG was when actually Dyrus had joined TSM. Around that, it was the tournament you didn't play in, the one that xHazzard went. This is when he joined TSM, and that's when TSM became like the best in North America, and they're winning everything. So in theory, he was like the best NA top laner, people would have said. Now his style was maybe more akin to like a hotshot style. Like I'll just like play with a 1v2 up here so that my other lanes can win, you know,
yeah.
And that's how we're going to win the game. Now your style was this very aggressive, sort of like a star top laner style, and as we remember in Dignitas. But that style obviously involves like other elements of the team doing things that either favor you or letting you do your job, basically. Now, there's a weird thing I've noticed among pro players, even in other sports, okay? So if someone in basketball is like an all-star center, and so his whole career he plays like really close to the rim, he's only doing these power moves, he might like look at like a point guard and be like, oh, I wish I could do that, you know, like getting to carry the ball up all the time, you do like flashy moves, make the cool pass, like whatever the one thing they can't do, they always look at that and think like, oh, I wish I could do a bit of that, and they always have that going inside. It's a bit like when a girl, okay, the girl who has straight hair, she's always trying to like curl it, make it all frizzy. The one who has frizzy hair, she's like, oh, I wish it was all straight, you know? So there's this mentality where people will always want to be like really well-rounded and they want to be good at everything, okay? So if we think of this context here, in the era when you go into CLG, it seems like the game as in general at top, the style that people kind of had to play if you wanted to be successful was more of this go even style or play against 1v2s. It wasn't just like outright win the top lane. So there's a degree to which you might have been forced to play that style. But we were talking before when you felt like you were the best NA top laner, okay? That was when you were playing the other style. And obviously you might have gotten good and you might have learned how to play this other style. But I always get the feeling people will never be as great at like something that's not as natural to them, that's like a bit artificial, whereas the natural thing, like their instincts, everything just works. So basically my hypothetical question goes like this. If we took that same CLG lineup, we don't change any of the players, but in some way we tweak a few things, we make it so that it's not just like Doublelift's going to win the whole game. He can have a big role as well, but like our second carry or our joint carry has to be Voyboy. You know, Voyboy has to be allowed to play the balls to the wall style, and what we'll do is any of the risk, you know, we'll take it off by loading other people up into certain positions. Would that have been the better route if we go back in time now? Would that work?
Well, personally, I would say it would have probably worked better. That's obviously, of the team, yeah, right? Obviously, I think we could have done better. I think as a whole, when I'm allowed to just do what I think is best and like play the champions that I want to play, I think if you just look at my career, like my team, myself, like our performance is always better. Obviously, there's still wins we pick up here and there when we have like a sort of different play style. Like obviously CLG, we weren't bad. Like we performed second best team at Season 2 World Champions in NA. We made it there in the first place. We took a game off SK, which, well, whatever. But I mean, we weren't a bad team. We weren't like just terrible, but we couldn't beat IG. We couldn't beat a Zubu Frost, and that's all it took to knock us out. But yeah, I mean, I think I personally would have liked to see maybe a more emphasis on that. It's definitely something we tried on CLG. Like, not to say we didn't play those champions. Like, going to the World Championships, I was stoked to play Diana. Like, Diana is not a champion that's like, oh, you're just gonna be a tank. Like, you're just gonna be too. Like, she was strong at the time. I was confident on her. Like, she is a champion that can carry. And what happened in some of those games, for example, like I would go top lane Diana, I'd take TP, and then I'd go against like a York who would take every single blue buff and just sit there, and I would basically just farm it out. So I wasn't even really in a position to make plays. And then all it took, like the sample size of what the games that people judge me on are basically just like 2 or 3 games at World Championships. And then going into those games, we scrimmed like hundreds and hundreds of times. We tried so many different things, and a lot of them actually worked. Like, for example, our Katarina strategy, where I would play Katarina and we build a team comp around that, pretty much like undefeated. Like when we practiced, like CLG was our main scrim partner. We played against them so many times, and that was basically a strategy that almost never failed for us, which is why we kind of held it for the later matches. In retrospect, probably should have played something along that line in the group stages just to take home an easier win. And like our Diana start was good too. Like we had all these strats prepared, and they weren't always focused on double lift, but as a team, like going out of those games after we lost, I think a lot of the emphasis was kind of like, well, if Voyboy just played like a tank, maybe if he just did this or did that, then we could have just played the way we know is best, and we know that we can just allow double lift to carry. So I definitely think that's a play style that just has to be agreed on as a team, and we definitely tried a lot of things. So in the end, what we ran just didn't work out.
Because when it was announced you'd been removed from the team, I mean, technically you were benched first, I remember. You didn't actually get directly kicked off. But when it was announced, the official announcement, I've noticed this is the same way with all CLG removals, okay? They always say something along the lines of like, you know, we came to a team decision that, you know, this lineup had no future, and we need to make a decision for the future, for the long term of what can work. And they always make it sound like, even if things were okay then, like, you know, they wouldn't maybe have worked in a year from now. But you actually said at the time that you didn't see any reason for there to be roster changes. And the reason why that's an unusual comment for me is because usually if someone felt like they were playing well, they wouldn't say like, I don't want roster change, in the sense like I don't want to be cut myself. They'd maybe say like, you know, maybe someone else should have been removed in the team. Maybe that was the plan. Now from what you're saying here, it sounds like if they'd kept the exact same lineup then, gone forward say the next 3-4 months, with the style you had then, would roster changes not have been needed and it still could have worked? Was it like we were talking about before, like you needed to tweak the style of the team to fit you more or to allow you to do more? What were you thinking when you were saying this at the time?
So that's interesting, because at the time when we were having the discussion, like basically they came to consensus, they had these meetings and decided that they didn't want to play with me in the future. And then at the final meeting where we were all talking as a team, I was like, do you really think I haven't been performing well enough to like stay on the team? Like, I think I've done just as well as GG, I've done just as well as Hotshot. Like, I don't really understand why you guys feel the need to change the roster. And basically, what I remember Doublelift actually saying was, I think you're the best top player in NA. I think you're better than Wickd, but we don't want to be the, like, I don't know if Doublelift said this next part, but it was like, we don't want to be the best team in North America. We want to be the best team in the world, and we just don't see that happening with you on the team. And so, basically, they thought like putting Hotshot back top, allowing him to play a role he's more comfortable with, getting sort of more in line with that protect the Doublelift play style, stuff like that, and just bringing in someone else to fill in that missing spot. Like, for example, they brought in Loco at the time, and they thought Chauster, because he was like, at the time, was like the mastermind of the team. They respect him as the smartest player. He would just be able to jungle really, really easily and just carry the game from there. And all anyone else had to do was just funnel resources into Doublelift. And I think as a team, they came to consensus that was how they wanted to play, and that's how they could reach the point of being the best team in the world. And yeah, I mean, I remember like I was so confused because I couldn't fathom. Like, I asked, like, who would you, like, don't you think I'm better than Hotshot? Like, don't you think I've been playing pretty well up until this point? And no one disagreed with me. Everyone was like, yes, but this is just something that we think is going to be better in the long term for the team, and it's something that we've discussed about, we've come to the consensus, and there's nothing that can be changed. So I was like, okay, I guess it is what it is.
Because when I ask this next question, I don't want it to sound like, since you were kicked out of the team and you thought you should stay in, that this is an obvious like chance for you to flame CLG or whatever. But if I think of the history of CLG, afterwards when they brought Loco in, they actually did okay for a little while, but a lot of that was, if you remember, was when like Doublelift was getting like a pentakill every game or something. So really, it wasn't that the team was that much better, they just had like a player going mental, okay. But if I look at the history of CLG from then on, it's pretty much downhill. And when I think of the team, you have a point there, like who can they get who's going to be better than you in the top lane there? So really, it comes back to the age-old thing of, well, at the time, we all thought, okay, well, you can never remove HotshotGG because he's never going to cut himself from his own team. Yet, if you look down the players in the lineup, okay, maybe you could make a case now, maybe Big Fat LP needed to be moved from mid or something. But if it's not you who gets removed, and it's not Doublelift, and it's not Chauster, well, there's like, it has to be HotshotGG basically, since he's one of the few people in theory who could have been underperforming at their role. And I actually, again, to talk about an interview I did with Skara, I asked him in March of this year to pick like a dream team of NA players, okay? And the idea was he was going to build like the ultimate team for me who could beat like the Korean overlords or whatever, you know. And he basically picked like the CLG lineup that you had, but with Saintvicious in the jungle and with like, I think Reginald middle or something. So basically like all CLG people. And so in theory, CLG could have had all of these players almost, except for the Reginald pick, obviously. And so we look at CLG's periods gone down since then. This is obviously like a philosophy that they had, that they could either move Chauster positions or they could keep HotshotGG. It's easy to say now since they've removed Hotshot, but was it wrong? Like, if we go back in time now, if we actually could reasonably show them what happened since, is the right move at that point in that team to like remove Hotshot and bring in another jungler? What do you think the right move should have been?
I think there were a lot of possible options, obviously. I think all of those were actually considered. Like, I definitely remember there being a discussion about like Hotshot stepping back, becoming like kind of the coach, kind of like the bigger figure on the team, and having someone step in for the jungle, or like just keep me on the team, put Chauster on jungle, bringing in support. Like, I'm pretty sure all those options were discussed, and I think personally, I think those would have been favorable for the team. But I mean, obviously, I'm a little bit biased because I thought I still deserved to play. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things could have happened. I don't think, for example, like when Hotshot started playing top lane, I don't think he did bad. I don't think he was the bad jungler. There was a period of time towards the end of the first split where like Hotshot started to fall off, but for the most part, it looked like the CLG lineup was doing okay. Like, they didn't do terrible the first split. We as a team, like for example, when I was on Curse, we did phenomenally. Like, I got back in that carry position. I was given like full control to do whatever I want and just like basically pick the champions I want, pick the role I want to play per game, and we did like really, really well. But yeah, I mean, it was just like different play styles. Like, there's many ways to play the game. You just have to pick out as a team, as players, as an organization, what you want to play, how you want to approach the game. And there's a lot of different philosophies. Like, every World Championships, we see all these different philosophies clash, and then whichever team comes out ahead is obviously has the predominant one at the time. So in like some different metas, like maybe my strategy where I'll play something like we have a lot of high impact roles, champions on every role, that could be the best. But then maybe like, for example, in different metas, it's all about the AD carry. Like you have to play safe top laners, you can't play anything risky. Mid laner has to be safe, top lane has to be safe, jungle has to be like high damage, stuff like that. So it's just really how you want to approach the game. And at the time, they had decided that they want to approach the game differently than I thought we could approach it, and I'm not sure how well it's worked out for them. But I mean, it's like there's so many different factors that go into results and performance that it's so hard to say in retrospect.
Another thing about you being removed that people might not know, when I looked into the history, I found that when you first joined, actually before you joined CLG, you mentioned in an AMA somewhere that one of your best friends in League of Legends was Chauster, and that you got along really well with him. And so then you joined CLG, and obviously people might not know it now, but in theory Chauster should have been one of the people who was on your side or was favourable towards you. Were you a bit shocked when this documentary came out, like the way you were portrayed, or the way it was kind of... It seemed like that was like the final note of the original document, was kind of like, you know, we had to remove Voyboy, like that's it. That was like, it seemed a bit like you were getting scapegoated a bit. I mean, did you get this sense at all yourself? I mean, you were saying before, like you didn't get included in any of the meetings. Was it really just out of the blue, like you were totally shocked that all the people on the team could just suddenly, one day they just all decide themselves, you know, he's out of the team?
So, okay, so the thing with Chauster, the question was like, who's your best friend on CLG? And at the time, like I was really familiar with Chauster. I talked about a bunch of stuff, like maybe school or just like the game in general. So I was pretty comfortable in just saying that. And I mean, I don't think that really changed that much on CLG. Like I think becoming a part of the team and just like going through the arguments and the phases and stuff like that definitely just kind of like desensitized everyone from each other. But I think overall, I was a bit surprised with how I was portrayed. Back when we were in Korea, there was actually like a period where it was like, well, we're not doing so well, we're like dropping scrims. They actually considered dropping me at the time and bringing in, I think it was MacNoon or something,
really?
Before the World Championships. So yeah, that was definitely something that was on the table. And there was also problems that we had with GG. Well, not we, but like the team thought that there was problems with GG, so they're considering doing something there too. So they had Hotshot had a talk with me. It was like, well, we don't think you're performing well. And I was like, well, I disagree, this and that. And then we went through a period where I was just like, I think that talk, for whatever reason, I don't really know if it was attributed to that, but I just started playing so well after that. Like, I literally, it was like maybe a period of like 3 weeks of scrims that like, or 2 weeks of scrims that like no one saw, but I was playing really, really well. And I think that just like renewed confidence in the team. Like I remember having a talk with Chauster after that period where I was like, so don't you guys think like you kind of were just like blaming me for the problems with the team were having? He was like, yeah, we did. We were kind of just like scapegoating you. And I mean, I don't know. It's like hard, but he was like, yeah, he was like kind of sorry. And then after that period of time, we were just like doing really well. We went to Worlds, we underperformed, and then the rest happened as it did. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't a complete surprise. Like when they had the meeting, I was like, why am I the last to be called for the meeting? I was like, okay, this is a little suspicious. And I walked from my room, and everyone was there, and I was like, damn, like, just tell me.
It's like the intervention.
I was like, all right, I figured it out. And then, yeah, I mean, it happened as it did, but it definitely was not something that I was like, it's not something that I saw coming. I put the pieces together as it happened, but it's definitely something that I don't think was like deserved or anything like that. But yeah.
Is there a degree to which you had to like recover from being in CLG? Because first of all, the thing with being in a team like CLG is there's like the fan pressure is going to be huge, because everyone first of all remembers CLG from when they were winning tournaments, and so if they're not winning immediately, there's going to be criticism and expectations. But also, like you're saying, you had to like change your play style to fit this new way your team was playing. And so at the time, I remember I also saw in an AMA, you mentioned something along the lines of like, you know, I can't play my old balls to the wall style, like it's not as viable now, or I can't play it in this team. And yet you mentioned MacNoon there. If we remember, the end of that year going into the beginning of next year was when MacNoon basically went mental, playing that kind of super aggressive dive style where his team just supported that style, and they were the best team in Korea at the time. Is there a degree to which you had to like unlearn things from CLG or go back to your old style at all? And what do you think of this period?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think as a player, I'm really, really good at just being able to look at my play style, how I play throughout like periods of time, and just learn from them. and adapt how I want to play going into the future. Like, for example, when I joined Curse, I was basically just in the mindset, like, I personally thought I was the best top laner in NA. Like, I can carry games. I know I can do it. Like, I play all the champions I need to. Like, just give me the setup and I will go for it. And when I joined Curse, like, we dominated for so long because basically it was like the team was all meshing well. We were doing really well together, and everyone really just trusted me to do my own thing. Like, I came into that team like as a rookie. They were all kind of questionable. Like, they didn't really know what happened with CLG, but there was definitely, I know I could feel when I joined there was like some questions like, is he really gonna like perform well enough? And I basically did really, really well for the whole period of time, and I just got a lot of confidence from my team, got a lot of confidence in myself, and I just ended up playing really well just as that carry role, kind of just taking control of the game. So honestly, I think when a team trusts me and trusts me to do well and perform, I'm not going to carry every game. I'm not going to play phenomenally every game. There's obviously, just with any player in the world, there are times where you're going to perform or you have a bad game. But I think overall, I do much, much better. And I think my teams do better when they just trust me and allow me to play the play style that I want to employ.
Like I mentioned before, when people can, the easy, lazy storyline for CLG is to go either Voyboy underperformed, or if they're a Voyboy fan, they go, oh, Hotshot didn't help him as the jungler. So then you can tell what the obvious easy storyline is when you come into Curse. It's like, oh, Saintvicious must just be doing everything he needs as the jungler. That's what's making him so good now. Has this been overblown at all? Do you have some amazing synergy with Saint? What does he do for you as a top laner, and vice versa?
Yeah, I think it's overblown. I think overall, just like the fact that my team as a whole, like I said, just believed in me, believed in the champions I was playing, believed in how I wanted to play the game. It's fundamentally the most important thing. Like, having your jungler come up top, camp a lane, gank lane, do this, do that. Like, it's really not as important overall. I played with Saint for a while. We've had like really good time periods together, and obviously some not so good ones. Like in the past season, as a team, we just didn't live up to the expectations that we had created for ourselves. But yeah, I mean, I play pretty well with Saint. I don't think it's something like, we don't have crazy synergy. We don't duo that much. But yeah, for example, Saint plays with Jackie a lot. Back when Jackie first joined Curse, he was a little bit more of a rookie player, I guess. I think at least from what I understand, he helped mold him. They kind of just played together so much that they kind of like got on the same wavelength. And so you'll see like they used to make a lot of like really good plays together. But overall, we just kind of play the game how we think should be played, and it didn't really work out that well this season. But like, for example, last season we would both just play like really aggressive champions that can make plays and just do really good things. And whether we were doing them together or just in different spectrums of the map, I think it worked out really well.
Whenever someone has like a very extreme public perception, okay, so when I think of this, I'm thinking of two people like Reginald and Saintvicious, because the public perception for people who don't like them is that like, oh, they're too hard on their teammates, or their personalities are too overbearing in a way, or they're too demanding. Now, I'm always hesitant to ask people who are on the same team as the player a question about them, because I don't want them to just feel obliged, like you have to say, oh no, he's great, he's a teddy bear behind the scenes, you don't know. I've seen like the videos of where Saintvicious was going off on Elementz when he maybe was a bit intoxicated. We've seen some of the comments he made about players on his team. Is there a degree to which Saint has how would you describe his personality on a team when you're playing with him? Like, what are the pros and what are the cons, though? You have to give me like the no bullshit version.
Yeah. So when you're winning, as something to do with Saint, when you're a team that wins and does well, the amount of arguments, the amount of stress you have is like baseline. It's almost nothing. Like, for example, first split of Curse, ever since I was on the team for the months going into relegations and then the first season, we pretty much like all this talk of Saint being like such a problem for teams and stuff like that. I didn't understand it really, because we were doing so well. We'd almost never lose games. Like, the arguments, if they ever happen, were just not really there. And honestly, I couldn't really understand it. I mean, on moments where I was like, just calm down. Like, that's not the approach you need to take to, like, help someone solve their problem or whatever. But then, yeah, obviously, when things started getting a little rougher, we started dropping games. We went through, like, sort of, I guess what I would say, bad periods of time where we just weren't playing as the Curse that we kind of paved our way for in the first split. I would say it started kind of show, like, there was definitely, like, problems. Like, Saint would get really he like attacked players basically, whether it was for mistakes he made or just like not being able to like learn the game, or just like not like random stuff, but he was like, his approach in trying to help you solve what he perceived as problems was really bad. He just doesn't he doesn't really know how to give criticism in a way that people can digest easily. Like, for example, when I see my teammate have a problem with something, whether it's like a mechanic or just like something about the game, I'll be like, so I'll first ask them the question. I'll be like, so why did you, like, for example, build like archangels into like abyssal scepter when you're laying against the Zed? And then so I'll hear the reasoning first. I'll try to understand it, and then I'll give my input on it, and I'll try to talk to someone about like why I'm trying to like explain to them how to like fix a problem. Like, for example, the appropriate build is not to get the abyssal. Obviously, you need the Zanya's reset just so that he doesn't burst you. And so, for example, I remember when we had this discussion with Jackie, he was like, well, I was just building it because they had a lot of AP, but it created a problem for our team because the Zed was just able to dominate him. But then, for example, when Saint would approach the same problem, maybe he'll be like, how do you not know your builds? Like, this is something that you have to know. Like, we've talked about it, like stuff like that. So it just puts players on edge. It just kind of gets them on the defensive, and it's not really like the best approach. I think he means well in what he says for the most part, but yeah, I mean, it's something he's been working on. Like, I think even though we've been doing really badly we did really badly for the last split, his attitude has definitely improved considerably over the season. But yeah, I mean, it's still something that he's working on. He just needs to learn how to give feedback, know how to look at his own mistakes, and I think it's just a mentality thing, really. I think a lot of it, at least from what I understand, was fostered from like his background in the Navy and stuff. Like, they give orders, you take the orders, and you just follow them. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts, and if you don't like it, well, that's too bad. But I guess he kind of employs the same approach when dealing with his teammates, and it has created some problems for us in the past, but he's been trying to fix it.
Is there a degree to which, like, is there a side to that kind of like very blunt, very straight to the point element that actually is needed though in the team? Because the reason I ask this is because when I think of those two players, Saintvicious and Reginald, the people who hate them just want to make it seem like, oh, if only those guys left the team, everyone would be really chilled on the team. But actually, when I look at the lineups of the Curse and TSM lineups, it really is like these extreme personalities, but then sort of players around them who are actually quite laid back, or maybe they're not very confrontational at all. And so there's a degree to which, as much as I don't want to like reward behavior that sometimes is obviously negative from these people, I can kind of see how maybe those teams need something to spur them on. Because I think if an example like Saint is that I always get the sense that part of why he's so hard on his teammates is because he comes from the world of a CLG type team where he thinks like a team that he plays for should be the best in America, or should have a chance to be the best in the world. So if it's not at that level, then like that's unacceptable, I mean, am I like over romanticizing his role here? Does your team need someone driving them, like a captain role?
I think the approach he takes, I have some disagreements with it. I don't think that like aiming to be the best or wanting to be the best players or team in like North America or the world really has anything to do with like how you deal with your teammates. I think, for example, if I was like in his position, if I was like granted the responsibility of like leading the team and stuff, I'd handle it very differently, and I don't think it would be bad. Like, I think at least from when I'm like sitting on the sideline, not sitting on the sideline, but when I'm sort of in that like secondary shot calling role and stuff like that, trying to help my teammates and stuff, I think they take it a lot easier. They generally respect what I say smoother than like for example when Saint would say it. So I think it's just something that's kind of built up over the past few months. It's pretty easy for like someone to just shut down completely when you're hearing something from someone that you don't want to hear it from. So for example, if Saint's saying something to someone and they're just like in the mentality like, oh, he's attacking me again, then they're not going to really listen to what they're saying. So for example, when I come in, I'm like, this is like what's actually the problem. Like, this is how you approach it. This is how we fix it. I think it generally is more well received. So I don't think you need to have that kind of like gridiron strong like forceful leader. I think there's a lot of ways you can take it. I don't think League of Legends as a game really demands that kind of leader. Like, I know from like playing on different teams and just like watching teams, like for example, Dignitas doesn't really have that kind of like an example that's relatable to everyone. Dignitas doesn't have like some kind of like gridiron. Like he's not gonna like Scar's not gonna like be like, yo Crumbs, like why did you do, like they're more like talkative, they're more laid back. No one's like gonna really take that aggressive stance, at least from my experiences. And I mean, it's just different approaches, like how you want to approach solving problems. These same like issues can be related to in like workplace environments or like school and stuff like that. And really, I mean, it's just people are different, so how are you going to deal with them? I don't know what the best way to deal with it people is. We've been having Saint take that kind of leadership role, and not to say it hasn't worked out, because there's been times where we've been doing really well and stuff, but then there's also times where we've had some problems and didn't go so well. So it's hard to say.
The sense, and I think I've even heard this directly from some of the CLG members when he was in CLG, it sort of went like this. Like the reason why we had to get rid of Saint was because with like his personality, you know, he had to be the guy who was going to be the shot caller, okay? And so they claim one of the reasons why they couldn't have him in the team is because they didn't think his shot calling was good enough, or they didn't agree with his style or whatever. This is mainly Chauster, I think, who didn't agree with it, because he's like another person who has very strong opinions. And these are guys who don't tend to agree, like, oh, maybe I was wrong on that point, okay. So how would you describe, since someone who's played with him, what is Saint's style of actual shot calling in game? I mean, is he doing stuff where it's all planned before the game and he's just going to call from a playbook? Is it intuitive in the moment? Is he going off what he's doing, like I'm going to do this so now everyone's going to do this? What's it like? How would you describe it?
Saint's style of shot calling, basically he'll look for a play, he'll make a call, and he just expects everyone to be able to follow up on it immediately. And sometimes like that can go really well for us. If we're winning a game, it's really good because he's very aggressive, and he'll just basically make a call to like dive or like go for kills if he sees it. If his champion has capabilities of reaching the enemy team, then a lot of times he'll just make the call and expect us to be able to follow up. His shot calling,
just attack and team fight.
Yeah, just like starting a team fight or going for people. A lot of times in team fights, each player will call out targets, and we'll just try to refocus our priorities on them. So team fights is a little bit more haphazard. But I think initiating team fights, going for picks and stuff like that, he's definitely pretty good at. It's very easy. I think Saint's a much better shot caller when you're winning the game than when you're losing. And I mean, that could be like the same thing could be said about obviously anyone, but it just fits his play style to be able to like look for a play and expect the play to work out. And obviously, if we have some kills, if we're up in gold, then yeah, you can kind of like overdive. You can kind of go for like really aggressive things that you normally wouldn't be able to. But then, like, for example, when we're behind in gold, he'll make those same kind of calls, for example, and they might not work out, obviously, and that could just double over our losses in some certain scenarios. And then I think from a macro standpoint, we've really had to reevaluate how we approach the game. So, for example, a lot of times this last split, we would just completely lose games because we were not able to like appropriately deal with creep wave pressure or switching our 2v1s or like all this other stuff. And that's something that we've had to really look at as a team, and we came to a consensus that like we're just going to try to make these calls, and it's not like all the pressure wasn't on Saint because he wasn't doing that job of like macroing our team very well, and we dropped quite a few games off of that. So for example, like for like late game scenarios where we're split pushing or we're trying to control creep waves and like force objectives and stuff, some of that pressure went on to me, and I took it pretty happily, and we were able to do a bit better. But I would say that, yeah, I mean, he's just a very decisive shot caller. Like, he'll see a play, he'll want it to happen. He expects everyone to go for it. But I think more in like a strategical standpoint, like game sense, like balancing pressure across the map, he's a little bit weaker on, and that's something we've been trying to work on as a team. Because personally, I don't feel like there needs to be like a shot caller that has all the pressure of completely microing like your team, and that's not something that Saint, like for example, was doing. But a lot of times, like, there'll be a lot of pressure for that kind of to happen, and that's something that this season we've kind of strayed away from. We started to make more group calls, and like for example, I'll take a lot of the lane control calls and stuff like that, and it did work out a bit better for us. But
so in the first split LCS Spring, there was this strange scenario where your team was up 18-4, you're owning the whole league, and then in the Super Week you go 1-4 and you managed to drop, I think, to second or third?
Yeah.
Third?
I think we got second.
Second, okay, yeah, you dropped to second, okay. So we know after that, the playoffs then basically was like a train wreck. Like, you lose the GGU, then you lose the Vulcan. Somehow you finish fourth when, like, the worst you could have finished was fourth. But before that, you were winning the whole league outright. So it's easy for people now to say, like, oh, well, since you did go 1-4, you know, it's justified to remove Elementz and all that sort of thing. Is there some truth to that? Were things really, like, behind the scenes falling off, and that was just like the outward manifestation of, like, oh, the 1-4, it was like our team didn't work anymore? Like, realistically, wasn't the team that went 18-4 with Elementz, if you just kept that team, could it have turned it around in the playoffs? What do you think of this topic?
Yeah, so going into Super Week, like I said, when fans look at games and teams and results, all they see is the event, like the games that actually happen at events like the LCS. But then when the players look at it, they're thinking about all the games, so like the scrims, the practice, and all that. And I think going into Super Week, we had like some problems with balling. Like, I feel like we had, for whatever reason, we had scheduled scrims. Like, we were basically super scrimming CLG for like the week going into that.
Yeah, I remember.
And so we were having a lot of problems with just not being able to like go head to head with them, and it was just like a consistent problem. So we really didn't know what to do. And going to Super Week, we played our games. We went 1-4, and I think from like a managerial standpoint, I think Liquid believed that like it was just like something had to be done. So I wasn't really involved in any of that decision making, but we decided to bring in Rux, and
was it just Liquid? Was someone else, Saint as well, involved in it?
I believe so. So that happened, and we brought in Rux, and then we lost in playoffs as well. Rux, I guess, was a bit nervous, didn't play that well either, but there was a lot more factors to our losses than just like switching out one player. I definitely think, to Elementz' credit, he definitely brought a pretty valuable aspect to a team. Like, whether we're losing or winning, he was like that kind of like positive force. He was kind of like, I guess I would almost say like the heart of the team. Like, he would just be like, all right guys, it's okay, like we got this, like we can do it. But then there was also the standpoint where we were having some troubles with bot lane, and like if you're just watching those happen and you feel like something has to be done, then like, for example, Liquid is going to do something about that. I don't know, it's so hard to say in retrospect. Like, if we had just kept Elementz, would we have done, like, would none of this like kind of downfall happen? I think it's pretty impossible to say. I would honestly say no, because the problems were definitely like, they didn't just start, they weren't like centered completely around bot lane. But yeah, I think it was just a really weird time for us, like going from having such an amazing season to just falling completely apart on our face like the last 2 to 3 weeks. It was tough.
Because the thing is, what I wonder when I look back on it now is, like, what was the thinking in actually having Elementz in the lineup in the first place? Because Elementz had already been benched even within Curse and then brought back again just before LCS. And so the thing with Elementz was, people always complained that he didn't practice enough, or he wasn't someone who outside of the actual practice games would like put in extra work to learn his role. This is what the big famous argument with him and Saint was about, the idea that he wasn't learning new champions, or he wasn't learning like the modern style of how to play. But when you were winning, people didn't seem to mind. It was all just fine at that point. So the problem is, wasn't it always going to eventually come to a place where you're going to lose some games and this would be the first thing that would come up? Am I exaggerating it by saying that?
So basically, the opinion that people in the pro scene have generally had, this is not my opinion, this is just what people say, it's like Elementz doesn't have the best mechanics, but he makes up for it in other areas, which I definitely think is probably a relatively accurate statement to make.
Like in what areas?
Just like I mentioned, just team play aspect, just being like you can't have a team of like 5 people. Like, I'm not saying this is what Curse was, but you cannot have a successful team where everyone's just like negative and just like it'll fuel on each other. You need people in there to just be like, guys, like let's get it together. Like, it's all right. Like, Curse on 3, 1, 2, 3, Curse. Like, let's do this. Like that. I don't personally. I don't know if not everyone's obviously going to agree with me, but I think that has a really big impact on team's performance, not only in League of Legends, but just team play overall. Like, mentality, performance, attitude, it's all definitely intertwined, and I think in that area he's like really, really good. But I would say, like, yeah, obviously if we never started losing games, this, like, we never would have really had an issue. I remember back before the spring split, we had Brian Rux and we were doing pretty well in like online tournaments and stuff like that, but then the concern with Rux was that, like, he wouldn't really talk enough, so we were missing out on that like team play aspect that we had with Elementz. And in the end, we decided to continue with Elementz. We did really well, and then towards the end, we kind of found ourselves in a bit of a doozy. So I guess the decision was made that was the best way to fix it. And in retrospect, I mean, it's really hard to say. Like, we dropped off. I don't know if that would have not happened if we had kept Elementz. I don't think it would have really made that much of a difference, but it definitely was not the results that we were hoping for.
Okay, because actually that's an interesting opinion to lead into my next question, which is going to be about Edward joining the team, okay? Because if the problem was that, Elementz was so terrible as a support, and then, we tried Rocks, that didn't work, well then in theory you got like the best support you could probably have gotten at the time, because people, at the time, everyone said Edward's the best non-Asian support player out there, and you managed to get him into your team. Yet actually Curse seemed like about the same level as it was before he came in the team, and it didn't really seem to change too much. I mean, what happened with Edward joining the team? People were expecting so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of just, I guess, brought to light that the issues on our team were not completely centered around bot lane. Like I said, like, we have had a lot of problems this last season. We were very slow to adapt to like the strongest champion picks. Some players would just like not pick up the champions that had to be played to be competitive in the meta, so like we'd delay that, we'd drop games because of it, and we'd have to like refocus and figure out what we have to do to fix that. And then obviously like the macro issues, like I think it's pretty hard to notice like when a team has like overbearing issues like shot calling and stuff like that, because a lot of it's just like you see all these teams doing so well and you see all these teams doing so badly, and they're just like, from a spectator standpoint, unless you're like really paying attention to what's happening, you're just seeing that one team lose and one team win. But from my standpoint, like, one of our biggest problems is really just lane control and being able to like switch lanes and push lanes and manage creeps properly. We were losing a lot of games just because we were just not able to do that, and no one on our team really was able to get that together. We were trying really hard. Eventually, near the middle of the season, we started to figure it out and we started to get it together. But I think from a play standpoint, Edward definitely played really well. There was definitely like some growing pains. We had to like transition him in. There was some communication problems early on. Like, for example, like Cop like had an issue where he was like, every time someone would ping, it would make like the flash icon, and he was like pinging the minimap. He's like ping here, ping here, ping here, and then Edward thought he was saying pink here. Oh, so he pinked like the brush, and we were like, wait, Edward, what are you doing? And he's like, pink, I thought you said pink. And we're like, no, that's not it. And we had a good laugh about it and all that, but like obviously that is something that can influence a game. But I mean, I think Edward played pretty well for the time he was on the team. Cop and Edward definitely improved as a bot lane. Cop, I feel like, at least, not my opinion, but Cop himself says he grew as a player. He says Edward definitely helped him develop into like more of an aggressive style, which I definitely think is something that happened over the course of the season. But yeah, I mean, as a team, we found a lot of different problems in multiple areas that just got in the way of our success. So
now, obviously, Edward doesn't have like amazing English, so I can't imagine you could have had like super 5-hour-long conversations. But in getting to know him, did this give you any insight into like what it must be like in teams like a Gambit or Masco 5? Like, what makes these great teams so good? Did you get any sense from playing with him?
Yeah. So on like, for example, it was really weird for Edward to come onto our team and have multiple people like saying what to do. Like, for example, at least from what I understand of experiences on Gambit, they would just have like one person saying what has to be done, and everyone else would just listen and follow. Like, people wouldn't even say anything, at least from what he's told me, and they would just do it, and if something went wrong, then they'd chime in and give their input or whatever. But for the most part, it was just like, do this, do that, go towards what needs to be done. And then like for our team, like, we were constantly giving updates, giving information, like my lane's pushing, like this and that, and he thought that was unnecessary. So it was just interesting to see like the difference in how he viewed that the game had to be played and how we thought it had to. And then towards the end, like, he started to like come to terms, like he started communicating a lot more, because originally when he joined, he wouldn't really talk. He would just kind of play, he'd throw out hooks, do what he needed to do, like use his spells. But we were having like big communication problems, and some of it was definitely language, but some of it I think was just him being accustomed to not really having to say much when he was on Gambit. So that's something that we definitely worked on. And towards the end, like, Edward was playing a lot better. He was communicating. Cop and Edward were just like making plays together, and I think he like really started to warm up near the end. But obviously, we weren't able to come together as a team enough to actually find the success that we needed.
In terms of your own individual play during this Curse era, one of the things is obviously it's become the case now that people famously think, okay, if Voyboy can play all assassins top lane, then he's going to be great, he's going to be the Voyboy we remember. But now we look around all the top laners, and they either play just straight up like Darien Impact style, like just tanks and bruisers everywhere, and they're trying to just play like up there on an island. Or maybe you can pick up someone like maybe like Shy or Flame, where they play some like AP mid type champions up there. Does the current meta of champions suit Voyboy's style? Like how do you evaluate how you do when you have to play the tanks and these characters?
Yeah, so for sure. So like in my heart as a player, I know that I excel on like high making champions, high mechanics, like people who can get in, like outplay your opponent, dive a squishy and get kills, like Lee Sin, Akali, Katarina, all these champions that I've just been known to excel on. And they're not to say they're all unplayable top, but right now the meta is very focused around mid lane. So for example, in like these past few series that we saw at Season 3 World Championships, pretty much everyone's playing like Jax, Shen, Renekton, and like Rumble, and there's not really much like variation from that. And basically all those champions except for Jax, I mean, he's actually more of my kind of play style. I was actually like a really big like Jax main. Like that was one of the champions I became known for originally. So he's not completely out of like my comfort zone. And not to say that Renekton and Jax and Shen aren't either, but there's a difference between playing a champion well because like you obviously are just mechanically skilled at the game, and playing a champion well because that's like where you shine. Like for example, I would say, like for example, you give someone who's like an amazing Vayne player like Caitlyn. Yeah, if they're a really good AD carry, they can play well, but they're probably not gonna be making like the same ridiculous plays that they're gonna be making on Vayne, because that's just a champion. That's just like a kind of play style that they've been accustomed to. So in the same way, like I can play Shen or Renekton at the level that is needed at LCS, but I don't feel like I can be like that huge like game impacting, game changing force that I can be on the assassins that I was playing when it was more in tune with the meta. And I think a big reason why you see those champions played so much top right now is because the goal for top laner is just to be like a solid rock steady force. They don't want someone that's going to do really anything but just be able to fight against the enemy top laner's pick. And because everyone is picking, because one person will pick like the safest top laner, the other person has to retort with another possible safest top laner, and they just want those two champions to be like high impact with little farm because of how prevalent 2v1 is. You just want to be able to get levels in and do what you need to do with like the least amount of items as possible. And like in the past few weeks, I guess there have been definitely like a lot of like, I guess not really meta changing strategies developed, but like deep warding and stuff has actually allowed people to get a lot of those soul lanes that they weren't able to before, which I think is definitely a big reason why Jax has came back into viability. Because before, like, yeah, Jax can 2v1 alright, like he's hard to get dove, he doesn't really farm that well under turret, but now it's very easy to like get deep wards out, see where their bot lane is going, see where their Shen is going, and send that counter pick in there to just scale well into late game. And then like for me, when I want to play like an assassin top or something, people will do that kind of same thing. Like for example, it's so hard to pull off like an Akali top right now. Akali, after the nerfs, she got kind of just downgraded into like the point where, yeah, she can be strong, but she still runs into the same problems that she always had, which was basically, if you play an assassin, you're relying on the fact that you like get ahead of the curve relative to your enemy champions, that you can just make plays on them and kill them consistently. And that's something that Akali, for example, could do very well when she would get that soul lane, when she would get those levels that she needed. But now, like when I would try to play Akali, I remember the last time I played Akali in competitive play, I played her versus TSM, I got 2v1'd, I fell behind in levels, and I just wasn't able to make those same kind of plays. And obviously, like, our team didn't do very well in that game either, so that definitely just added insult to injury for that pick. But it's like, assassins are best when you can be the one that is getting the most farm on your team, and you can just make plays on the enemy team. So for example, right now we see in mid lane, pretty much every pick except for like Orianna, just because she's so broken, is an assassin. Like people are playing Fizz, Ahri, Zed, just pretty much every assassin under the sun, and it's pretty much it's become the mid lane meta. It's just what people are running. They're getting that soul lane, they're fighting other assassins, they're making plays around the map, and the enemy top laners are just like tanky stuff that are hard for the enemy assassins to burst down, and are hard for the enemy top laner to actually like push out. So they're basically just farming against each other. And that's why, like, yeah, I personally, like, when I look at the mid lane meta, I'm like, damn, like, these are all the champions that I love playing, like, and then all the top laners are just playing like all these like bruisers, which I can play obviously because very good mechanically, but it's not something that I'm like, I go into a game like, this is what I'm going to carry the game with. Like, I'm so confident. And yeah, I mean, mid lane is just like, the meta is like, they're playing all the champions that I've loved playing top, and I used to be able to play it successfully top back when the meta was basically just like everyone just goes into their soul lane, you're guaranteeing you get that farm. You're guaranteeing you're going versus an enemy top laner, and it's just so hard to replicate that under the current situation. Like if someone was to pick a Kali top in the world championships right now, all that would happen is the enemy team gets deep wards down, they call the lane, they send the 2v1 versus them. Akali falls behind in levels, and she just can't burst anyone down, and you just basically lost off of picking something like that. There's literally no reason to pick a champion with that much volatility and that much chance to get shut down when you can just pick something that you guarantee is just going to be safe and useful without any farm. So, yeah.
So this leads to an obvious question, and I'm not just asking this like what you've just said there kind of led to what I was going to ask you about anyway, which is if you want to play the assassins and you confident in your mechanics, then the obvious pick in an ideal world would be, why doesn't Voyboy just become a mid laner? Now, is it as easy as that? Like, in an ideal world, you really could just start playing it tomorrow, and because you have the familiarity with the champions, you could excel? I mean, we're not saying, like, let's kick NY Jackie off the team or whatever, like, but is this something that's really crossed your mind? Is it something that could happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, like, I definitely think it would be possible. It's kind of weird for me to, like, be practicing mid and stuff and just like, and then see all these people like constantly asking like, are you moving to mid? Because in my mind, like for the last season, I actually played a lot of mid. Like I had quite a few casts in mid games, I had quite a few Zed mid games, and I was playing those champions because they were so strong, and I knew I went into those games picking them and being confident I could carry, and a lot of times it actually worked out well for us. Like for example, the only game that we won at playoffs was actually when I played cast in mid versus Dignitas, and the other two games we just dropped them pretty in pretty poor fashion. But personally, like, not to avoid the question, but in my mind, in an ideal team, there are two players that can play in either top or mid. They can fill both those roles, and they can play champions that fit both those roles, and then the team just builds team comps around them based on what they're more comfortable playing in each different scenario. So I think that would lead so much more versatility to a team. Like for example, if you're going to a game versus like two solo laners, instead of just saying like, oh, this is their top laner, this is their mid laner, we've scouted them out, we know what they're probably going to play, it just makes it so much hard to figure out exactly what they're going to do. It makes it so you can have so many more options, like based on what you want to do. You can pretty much just play whatever champions you want to play and just make it work. So if there's a crazy team comp that requires like 2 bruisers or 2 APs or stuff like that, then you have 2 players that are capable of handling that very well. And then yeah, I mean, this is actually something that I've been kind of paying attention to, like the CJ teams, what they were doing after Worlds, and Flame, who is pretty much one of the best top laners, at least in my opinion. He's actually playing a lot of mid now, so there's a potential there. I'm thinking maybe like, well, word on the street is like Flame and Shy are going to join the same team, and then maybe be able to like alternate or just have both players be on the team, 2 strong solo laners, and just be able to like make plays off of that, and just. I feel like that would be such a scary combination to go against. So in my mind, like an ideal team is going to have 2 players that can kind of fill that same role, that can play both lanes, that can play a lot of different champions confidently, and I feel like that would just add so much more diversity and like deepness to like the champion pools and potentials for the team to do stuff with that. And I'm like, that's something that we've definitely tried on Curse last season. I'm not sure what the plan is for next season yet. We still have a lot of time to go through that and practice and stuff like that and get comfortable. But I would definitely be open to being able to play a lot more Assassins mid and stuff like that for champions in a position that I can carry going into next split. But obviously not completely giving up the like confidence I have playing top lane and stuff like that.
Okay, this will sound like a strange question, so let me set it up like this, okay? One of the things that people always mention about you, it's even like a piece of trivia on your Wikipedia, I think, Leaguepedia, is something like what your SAT scores were or whatever, or the fact that you're academically very intelligent. So if I hear that someone is like a very intelligent person, or they're very reflective about their game and analytical, I would expect, if I hadn't seen them play, they're probably going to play like Genja from Moscow 5, they're going to play extremely calculated, always like minimum risk possible. They're just going to want to play very safe and kind of like beat the opponents using like their mind. Yeah. But then when I look at your style of play, it's almost like you're trying to do the opposite of that, and you're trying to make it all just about like mechanics right in your face, let's kill each other as fast as possible. Why is it so different in the game? Is this something that's always been in your personality?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's a fair question to ask. I think there's a lot to say about minimum risk versus calculated risk. So in my mind, when I see like on the forums and people like talk about my game style and stuff like that, people often say stuff like, he's like so aggressive, like he'll just constantly like try to kill you like no matter what, and then like it's either gonna work out really well, he's just gonna snowball and carry the game, or he's just gonna get shut down. And just like feed or whatever. And I don't really think that that's something that actually happens. When I play the game, I generally think I'm basically constantly measuring my risk versus my reward. So if I think, is it worth it to go for this harass here? What am I going to take? Like, what's the chance that the enemy jungler is here? If the enemy jungler is actually here, like, is it actually worth it delaying him? Do I think I'm going to die? Like, this is stuff that's constantly like refreshing through my mind. And obviously, to an extent, every player has to consider this when they're playing the game. Like, that's just the essence of playing League of Legends. But when I play, I'm basically saying, okay, I'm going to take this risk. I'm going to go aggressive. I'm going to try to get an advantage here and try to build off of it. And if I can get one little advantage throughout those risks that I'm taking, then I can start snowballing it and it works in my favor, which is something that it's very easy to do for me in a solo lane. Like, I'm just very confident in just taking one little mistake my enemy makes and just making them pay for it. So if I can force them into like a corner and force them to make that mistake, then I can take that and potentially just win a game off of it. And that's something that it's never going to go without risk. Like, you cannot carry a game, you cannot make a play, you cannot get a solo kill without sort of taking some sort of risk, whether it be overextending, whether it be taking a bad trade here and there just to feel for what your opponent's play style is. And those are all things that I try to do, and a lot of times it works out. It doesn't always, but when it does, you can definitely see it happen. So I definitely feel like I don't just blindly go aggressive. I think when I make an aggressive play, when I try to make something happen, I'm like doing it like informatively, calculatively. It might seem like people think I play that aggressive because I'm always looking for those opportunities, but that's just kind of how my play style is. That's how I've just been accustomed to play the game. I feel like if you constantly pressure your opponent, if you constantly make them fear you, if you constantly just pretend like your jungler is behind you, or make them be like, hey dude, like this guy's playing so aggressive, like come gank my lane, I feel like that just has a big mental impact on your opponent. Like, they will start to kind of fear you, they'll start to play differently, and that's just something that you can't afford to happen. I definitely have seen players like fall apart when playing against me just because I'll just do the same thing over and over, or I'll go for like trades that they just would not expect me to go for, and they'll just make a mistake based off of that. And that's just that's what I love doing. Like, if you can get in someone's head, then you basically won, and I think that's something that I do pretty well. You can never go into a game like fearing your opponent. Like, if you go into a lane matchup or something and you're just like, damn, like this is like HotshotGG, this is Voyboy, this is like Reginald, like this guy is like I've lost him in the past, like he's so aggressive, like every time he goes up with like a stun card ready or something, I have to back up because like their junglers are like, if you think about all those things when you're playing, you're just gonna fall flat on your face and not do well. You just have to approach every game with like a clear mind, clear like set of like priorities. Like, when I play against players, yeah, sure, I'll take their playstyles into account. Like, for example, versus Darius or something, I'll be like, okay, he's probably not going to go aggressive. He's going to go for the minimized risk plays. He's just looking to farm. If I open myself up to a vulnerability or something, he'll try to take advantage of it. But otherwise, he's not going to really try to create those opportunities as aggressively as maybe a different player would. But that's all just information I'm taking in. It's not that I'm actually worried or fearing something that the enemy player is going to do. And if you can create that kind of fear, that kind of worry, and get it inside the opponent's head, which is something that I feel like I do pretty well, then you just can build advantages that snowball off of each other.
When I did an interview with Saint, and this was like back in December of last year, okay, he said a line which sounds like a really sexy line. He said, like, if Voyboy was allowed to 1v1 anyone in the world, like, he'd do very well against them. Now, you've played against like Shy, you've played against Flame, you've played against pretty much PDD, even a lot of the people who people consider like the elite top laners. Is there something you really believe? Like, if tomorrow I could just ban it, so it was impossible to 2v1 lane, it was impossible for someone to just camp you 24/7, it was just purely going to be you versus the other top laner versus anyone, would you do very well?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think my mechanics are pretty much as good as they need to be. I'm always working on improving them, obviously, but I think they're comparable to any other top laner in the world. I think my game understanding is good, like trading and stuff, skirmishing, 1v1ing someone, lane control, that's all stuff that I excel at really well. But I think a lot of League of Legends, it's basically players will go through periods of time where they're really on point, like they're at the top of their game, they're carrying, they're being like respected as like the best in their role and stuff. Like, for example, I could make a really easy comparison. Like right now, Faker, everyone regards him as the best player, the best mid laner in the world. And some people were saying the kind of the same thing about me, like for example back at IEM Hanover. So it's very hard to say like over, like I feel like if you take a player, take them out of like different periods of their career, it's like you can find them at vastly different points of time. Like, for example, Mac Noon, everyone thought, well, not to say he's not one of the best top laners, but he was basically I was like, yeah, Mac Noon is like the best top laner in the world. He's doing phenomenally for this period of time, like this tournament, and he does really, really well. And then over some time, like, they end up underperforming a little bit, actually end up leaving their team, and just people are like, what happened? Like, I guess they just got bad. But in my opinion, like, that's not, like, in some scenarios that is kind of what happens, but I feel like people just go through periods of time where they just don't perform to the level of expectations that everyone's created, and it's pretty much a given that any player is going to go through periods of time where they're not playing as well as they were in their prime. So, for example, when I was on CLG, I wasn't doing it nearly as well. I mean, relatively speaking, I wasn't just completely dominating people. I wasn't carrying games by myself for my team as when I was on Dignitas. But then when I rejoined Curse, you saw a lot of those same patterns emerge where I was just dominating. We would win games just off of me being able to kill my opponent in laning phase and stuff like that. And I definitely think, like, if you take me at my prime, which could occur at any possible time, like, it's really hard to say when it's going to occur versus, like, other people in their prime. I definitely think I could compare, and I think that could be said about, like, a lot of the players that I respect, a lot of top laners. I don't think I'm any better than, like, for example, Flame or Shy or anything like that, but I definitely think that I could compete with them if given the right opportunity.
So from some of the answers you've given in this interview, it sounds like it's almost like you either philosophically disagree with how top lane is played, or you just don't like how the current meta forces it to be played. So in that case, who is the top laner, who's a current top laner now, who actually does, like, have a style that you like you approve of this style, or you look at him and you go, he is impressive to me? Is there someone who stands out?
Yeah, definitely. I would say Flame. I've always respected him as a player. Every time I watch him play, I see very little mistakes. Even in the series that they lost to KT Rolster, he played, like, phenomenally. Every time he played, he would just, like, dominate Insec. He basically was, like, carrying the game for his team. He would make plays that shouldn't have been happening given the circumstances. Like, his team would be losing elsewhere, and he would just be, like, dominating his lane, drawing jungle pressure and stuff like that. And although he wasn't able to make it to Worlds, I still think he's definitely, like, one of the best solo laners in the world. And I really like the way he plays. Like, for example, he plays a lot of the same champions I did. He even played Akali after she got nerfed. He played versus Shen. He's played top lane Diana, which is something that I've played a lot too, which I really like. And he's definitely one of the players that, like, isn't content with just being, like, a tanky top laner. Like, he'll play Shen really well. He'll play all these champions that need to be played in the meta. Like, for example, I'll do the same thing, but in our hearts, like, I know he kind of feels the same way I do. Like, we want to be playing those carry champions. We want to be playing the assassins, the champions that make plays. And yeah, I mean, Flame definitely has my respect forever and always until he does something that just confuses me.
Okay, so I always end with a hypothetical, and the way I thought of it for you goes like this. Okay, so as usual, aliens come to Earth. As usual, they always have to kill all your team, unfortunately, because that's people just pick their teammates otherwise. So they kill all of Curse, but the aliens, in these questions, they're always getting a bit more weird with what they're doing. So for you, what happens is they look at your career and they go, okay, we didn't kill Voyboy's the only one we didn't kill on Curse, okay. So they look at your career and they go, okay, CLG, Dignitas, you never really had that, like, world championship win. You never had that moment where you could go, I was on the best team and I was the best player and I won I was, like, #1 totally. So we're going to give you a chance to do that, okay. But the condition is, this team is only allowed to be created so that Voyboy is the best player on it and he can be the best player in the world. And so remember, all the Curse players are dead, but everyone else in the world's there. So you have to pick people to put in this team in the other 4 positions who are going to be able to make you the best, like, they're going to be able to do what you need them to do in the other lanes or support you in the right way. Who would you want on this imaginary team?
Interesting. Wow. Okay. Let me see. It's such a hard question.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what then. As a way to kick it off, say we go position by position. Okay, so say we start with jungler. Okay. What as you're thinking of who the jungler would be, what type are you thinking of? What should he probably be able to do for you, or what would you want in this ideal jungler for the Voyboy?
So I would say, like, the ideal jungler is basically someone who is willing to devote enough resources to my kind of play. So, for example, if Riot changes the jungle so that, like, you sharing EXP at, like, level 1 will allow you to get, like, an EXP advantage and get, like, an early level 2 or something, which is something that we were able to do before. Like, for example, when I was on Dignitas, then they have to be okay with doing stuff like that. So and then just obviously someone who can adopt any type of champion, any type of jungle play style based on how the meta is. Personally, I would say I'd probably like to play with IWillDominate for that kind of situation. I think he's pretty much, at least from when I played, it was just like the most synergy I felt with any other player. We had really like just good games. We like worked on a lot of different strategies that kind of all that I was talking about, and it just felt really, really good. So I think he'd definitely be able to help me accelerate my playstyle to the point that I need to be. Probably the best. And yeah, that's for jungle.
Like, which would you go to next? Like, which should we put in place? Like mid or AD? Which for your team would be the next vital role?
Probably mid.
So would you want like a all-star mid? Would you be like a supportive mid? What do you think would suit your style best?
So for the other solo lane, I would just want someone that can pretty much play anything that needs to be played for the meta. Someone that can just like adapt from champion styles very easily, and knows how to play aggressive when needed. So they could put pressure on their lane. They could apply pressure and just basically draw attention. Like for example, when I was on Dignitas, one of the big reasons why we were so successful was also because me and Scar were just able to put a lot of pressure on our lanes combined, like at the same time. So a lot of times, and I think some people sort of overblow this fact, but it definitely was something that occurred to a degree. Like we just put so much pressure on our lanes that the jungler would have to come to one, and we'd be able to take advantages elsewhere on the map. So I definitely want a player that just is capable of doing that. I would say honestly, for the most part, I would say for the most part, just like looking at the league scene for the past 2 years, the mid that I've always just been consistently the most like impressed with has been xHazzard. I think he's just like really solid. I've never really had like an experience where I'm like, well, xHazzard underperformed, so his team didn't do well. Like I've always just respected him as a player. I remember back after I played Lee Sin, he was trying to learn as well, so he just hit me up, and I think that's a really good quality to have in a player. Someone who's just always willing to learn, not only from like yourself, but also like your peers, and just improve. So I think he's really solid. I think we'd be able to make some really good things happen. And then for support and AD,
I mean, if you think back through your own career, like you must have an idea of when you're playing your best, like what a bot lane usually is doing that's working, or what tends to help what you're doing there. Is it better if they're really good down there and it's like taking some of the attention away, and maybe the jungler has to go down there? Is it better if they're just playing like less of a intensive style where people can focus on you more? What do you want?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the ideal scenario, like just to sort of look at your question, when you try to put like a player in the position to be like the best in the world, like carry it, the team completely, it's very hard to do so because like the game is never focused around like a player. So for example, Faker in like their series where it's not in Sword, he played okay. He didn't do amazing versus Nagne, for example, who everyone's considered was just like a weaker player, but his team really stepped up. They applied pressure, and eventually you saw Faker start to perform really well. But it's not to say like just because Faker was like on the team with like these players that he was able to just like dominate the game and just carry. So I think the ideal scenario would just like for a team, I guess, built around me would just be to have like 4 other players that are just able to put as much pressure as possible, not to like surpass mine, but just to be able to match mine. So it would just put teams in a very feeble position. They're like, well, like what threat are we going to choose to deal with? And it's not necessarily to say like they're not going to be able to deal with me, so I'm going to be like the best player in the world or whatever. I'm just going to completely carry my team. It's more so going to be like, well, they can't deal with any of these threats, and we have to focus some of them down, and then the others are going to come up and rise up and be able to put the team on the back and carry. And that's really the ideal play style that I'd like to see. I think like a very balanced mid, top, bot. Everyone's just trying to carry. Everyone's trying to do their best. You just basically make a team, put teams in awkward positions. Like there's not one person. It's not like shut down Faker, you win the game. It's not like shut down Uzi, you win the game. It's just like, well, this team is just solid across the board. we have to deal with some of their threats. We can't deal with all of them. What do we do? And they're gonna make decisions. They're not always gonna be the right ones, and that's how your team comes out ahead and just takes games.
So then who fits this description? Which bot lane could apply pressure, be aggressive, draw their own attention, you know? Like, is there one in history that you've always thought fit that kind of, that example you just gave?
This question's so bad for me because, like, when I think of players, it's like, I'm so, like, objective about performance. Like, I never really, like, look and I'm just like, these players, like this guy, like this ball lane. Okay. So it's like even like, for example, when I say like Alex Ich, it's just because like I know he's a good player. I've seen him play and I've always been impressed and I would be comfortable with that. But even then, like it's not really clear cut. And then, for example, when I say Dominate, it's just because I've played with him in the past and I'm very comfortable with his play style and his personality and stuff like that. So, for example, to go beyond that, it's so hard for me to do because, like, when I think of players, I'm never thinking like this is like because of this player, because of this performance, these results were achieved. Okay. It's really just this team does well. You can look at how these players are doing in the context of this team, and you can judge it based on that. But like for me to go back in history and think like this ball lane would be like the best, or like this mid, or this general, it's so tough for me to do.
I mean, is there a bot lane though that fits the example then that you could pick out?
Just going back in history, this is just completely relative to like the context of the time. I would honestly say Doublelift and Chauster, when we first went to Korea, were like really, really solid. They were just able to carry games flat out. Like, we would just be able to just do whatever we really wanted, whether do well ourselves or kind of underperform a little bit, and they'd still manage to just destroy the enemy bot lane and just carry the game. So that's just the kind of pressure that I'm looking for. Obviously, throughout our time period in Korea, that kind of waned off, but I definitely had I definitely had a really big amount of respect for their ability to just make plays for a long period of time when I was on that team.
What were they so good at in that bot lane?
Honestly, I like, it's so hard for me to like put it together, but I think, let me start. I think for the most part, they were just like, they just knew each other so well. Like, going into that, Doublelift was basically like mentored by Chauster. He was just like taught how to play the game. Like, Chauster would just go through every mistake he made, everything he had to improve on, and they just like built so much synergy, which I think really like contributed to them just being on like the same wavelength for a really long period of time. And then I think eventually that started to wane. I think it just like other ball lanes started to get better, and I think that kind of like learning period where Doublelift was just like completely like in the same wavelength and Chauster kind of disappeared. There started to be a little bit of dissonance, and I think that like the strength was definitely not there. Like, they tried to put it together again for this season. They had some good results, but definitely not at the level that they or anyone else would have like really respected. Because like back then, I think a lot of people would have agreed Doublelift and Chauster were the best bot lane in the world, and then now like they put them back together. They didn't really work out the same way, but it was definitely like a golden era for those two.
Okay, so is there anyone who at the end of this interview you want to thank or say hello to?
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you to our sponsors, TeamSpeak, Alienware, Nissan, and CM Storm. Big thanks for the support. And then obviously to my fans. I know this hasn't been the best season to watch. We didn't really do well. We ended up finishing 4th after the NALCS, and then going into the regionals, we ended up with 6th, which is not the results that we would have ever expected or wanted to give you guys. And as for myself, I'm just looking to improve my play style, just try to become net carry again going into next season. So I really hope that we can come together as a team and just show you guys the results that we would have liked to see. So just keep rooting for us, and thanks for the support, everyone.